You may think to yourself sometimes, I can't model or do scenery like those experts that I see. Well, I'm here to tell you that you can. I built this T-Track module using some very simple techniques, and I'm going to show you how to do it. This video is brought to you with support from my patrons on Patreon. These videos would not be possible without them, and if you'd like to join the Patreon community, you can follow the link in the description below and join for as little as $1 a month. First things first, we need to assemble the T-Track module itself. Now, I've done an entire video on building T-Track modules in this way. All you have to do is adjust your measurements. A curved T-Track module like this is 14 3/8 inch by 14 3/8 inch. I'm building it out of 1x3 pine with 1/4 inch plywood underlayment on top, and I'm using 1.5 inch screws to put the frame together with 1/2 inch screws going in on the top to put the underlayment down. And this is what you come up with, and it'll match up with most other T-Track modules. Again, check out that video so that you can see what to do and how to build one of these. Next, we need to mark where our track's going to go. I've brought my other T-Track module in as a guide for this, and I'm using Kato's super elevated curves for this. I actually recommend against this because they can be a little bit tricky in the way you have to assemble them, and using just the normal curves is a little bit better, but I had the proper pieces to make this work, so I went ahead and used what I had on hand. Next up, I'm going to take and mark out where I want my terrain to be. I'm going to have this kind of like a gentle rolling hillside with the track running through kind of a little valley in between the two hills. And to make the two hills, I'm going to be using Sculptable. Now, this is going to be a gentle, very, very low rise hill. I'm not doing anything dramatic, so Sculptable is really perfect for this. If you're doing a really tall hillside or a mountain, I'd probably go for a foam and Sculptable mix, but Sculptable is perfect for this. And when you're mixing it, I tend to, I've used it long enough to where I can just eyeball to where I know exactly what I want, but just use your manufacturer's recommendations on whichever package that you get, and that'll be a good guide. So I mix this stuff up, and then I just start placing it and making these smooth rolling hills. The best part about Sculptable is that it makes such natural looking hillsides. Like, you get such natural terrain with it, and that's what I love about using it in these type of applications. Now it's time to glue down the track. Now, honestly, you can use just about any glue that'll stick to wood and plastic. I've used caulk, I've even used white glue. This time I'm using super glue. I never used super glue and I wanted to give it a shot. I have it right here on these lines, and I'm going just on the inside edge. This is that high viscosity glue so that it just kind of sticks there. It's more of a gel, and this honestly held great. I don't intend to pull this track back up, so that's another reason why I'm okay with using super glue, and it's going to be less clogging, whereas caulk, sometimes by the way you have to glue it, especially with Kato Unitrack, it may clog up your joints depending on where you put it. So super glue is actually, I'm going to give this a good thumbs up, some high viscosity gel like super glue. Once that was all done, it was time to paint the entire module, and I'm painting it this base brown that I've literally painted everything else involved with the past layouts that I've done. You'll notice that I have a gallon of it. I buy simple latex household paint. You'll also know that I don't have the track masked off. You can mask the track off with painter's tape. I'm just confident enough in my abilities to be able to paint around the track, and I'm also going to be perfectly okay if the roadbed gets a little bit of paint on it, because I'm going to be ballasting it, and that's actually going to help with the realism a little bit. But I'm going to do my best not to get too much paint on it, mainly because I also don't want to hit the ties or anything like that. So go ahead and get this module painted, and then we'll let it dry. Now that our module is dry, it is time to ballast the track. Now I've done an entire video on ballasting Kato Track, and I've done multiple other videos where I did it as well, and I'm going to link those at the end. But the basic thing is that Kato Track is actually slightly more difficult to ballast than traditional track because of that plastic roadbed, but if you take your time and do it right, it really pays off. And the key here is to build up along the sides. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm running a lot of glue along the sides, and then I go ahead and dump the ballast. I don't worry too much about containing the ballast initially. I'm going to be sweeping it back up with a brush and patting it out, but you just want to take your time. Kato Track can look great with ballasting. It just takes a little bit more work. Once that is done, I can begin the process of gluing everything in place, and you'll notice that I'm misting some isopropyl alcohol on here. When you're misting track like this, you don't want to be too close. If you're using full on pressure like this, you want to use a low pressure, kind of like very gently squeeze, or you want to mist from a higher up angle. And this is because the mist can blow the ballast around and get all the work that you've done just all out of whack. So either mist gently up close, or you can mist normally from a lot higher up. And then once that's done, I use my condiment bottle full of my own homemade Scenic glue, which is, I think this one's actually about 40-60, so 40% white glue, 60% water, somewhere right around there, just to get all that glue soaking in. And you can see why we use the IPA, because the glue doesn't just like bead up, it runs gently off of everything, and don't worry about it, it's going to dry clear. But you can see how it just kind of soaks into that ballast instead of beading up on top of it. And that's why you do the IPA, because it breaks the surface tension. You can also do this with something called wet water, which is water with a few drops of dish soap in it. The advantage of IPA is that it dries a lot faster than wet water. I've had wet water take 2 days to dry, but you get the same result. So I let that dry overnight, and you can see it's a pretty hard crust. It looks like loose gravel, but it's locked in there. So I take a brush and dust off any excess, because it's time for the fun part. It's time to really start doing scenery on this thing. So I'm going to be doing exclusively super trees on the hillsides. So before I get any of the scenery done, I want to go ahead and get where I'm going to put the super trees. Now, the generic version of super trees is called seafoam. So it's just kind of these plant armatures that when you break them down right, they look like trees. I mean, they really look like trees. Now, sorry I know certain countries you can't get seafoam, so sorry about that, guys. I would love to find some alternative products. So if you guys that are in some of these countries where you can't get seafoam and you know these alternative products, put them in the comments below. But what I'm going to do here is basically I'm breaking up the armatures and I'm sticking them where I want to go, because I'm going to have to do some work to these to get these actually looking like trees. So basically I'm just drilling holes with my pin vise and getting the canopy looking the way that I want it to. And now you can really see that the module is really starting to come together. You can kind of get the idea of what this is going to look like. And this is really where it starts to get exciting. So the next thing is I need to paint all these, because they're not a very natural color for trees. So I'm using a little trick I learned from Steve's trains of using the corrugated cardboard boxes to hold them up. And then I'm just hitting them with some flat brown spray paint. Now, while those are drying, we can get to work on some of the other scenery. So we have all the holes drilled, so we know roughly where all of our trees are going to go. So we can start to put in our ground cover. And this is where it really starts to get fun. And what we're going to do here is we're going to cover all the brown areas with white glue. So I buy white glue by the gallon. So I'm just going to dump some white glue on here, and then we're going to spread it out with a foam brush. Now you want to make sure you catch it before it gets to those to the ballast for that. But we're going to spread this white glue all over, and then we're going to start putting Scenic material on it. Here I'm using Woodland Scenic's Blended Turf Earth Blend. It's kind of a brownish color. It's got that blended turf, so it's multiple grades of turf. And where I like to start is actually right next to the track. And I just use the lids to distribute it. You can use a spoon or anything like that, but doing that gentle tap is really, it gets a nice even distribution of all of the Scenic material. But I like to get everything out of the way because at the track, because it really is the most detail necessary part of this. After this, you can kind of get to where you're spreading it all over the place, but you want to get that area around the track right, because that area where the dirt and scenery meets the ballast is really a make or break area. But once you get that right, you can just start spreading the stuff all over the place and just make sure you get all of the glue covered. Now, once you're done with the earth blend, you've got a nice coverage. You're going to want to use some colors to bring the green out, especially if you're doing a summer. If you're doing a winter scene, it's totally different. But here I have some of Woodland Scenic's Fine Turf, and this is kind of a lighter green color, kind of lighter green, earthier, brownish green. But what I do is I basically just kind of sprinkle it and give kind of this patchiness, because if you look at a lot of natural areas, a lot of times you don't have just this even green coating. It's a lot of unevenness and patchiness with the ground coming through. So I am just going to be sprinkling this all over, and then once I get this to where I like this particular spread, I'll come back with some Fine Turf in a dark green variety, and I'll use that as kind of like an accent, and I won't put as much on there, but it'll definitely make the ground pop. Then once that is done, I come back with my IPA and I soak everything with isopropyl alcohol just by misting it just like before. And then I come back with my condiment bottle full of Scenic cement, and I just go and spread it as much as possible. Just remember that the glue, because of the IPA, will dilute out and spread out around, so you don't have to get every single nook and cranny. You do want to get some solid coverage though. Okay, and now we have our trees back. They look great. They look a lot more like trees. And now it's time for a fairly messy part, which is going to be covering these with foliage. Now, again, I've covered how to put foliage on these trees in a previous video that'll be linked at the end. But the basics of it is you're going to dip these things in Scenic cement, and then you're going to roll them around in a mixture of different green turfs so that you get different colors and different pops. And then you're just going to go back and place them in the holes that you had drilled previously. You may not be able to find all of them, so you may need to drill another one. But just remember, you're going to want to also dip a little bit of glue on the bottom so that it holds in place. All right, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a few little bushes and shrubbery on the layout. And I'm not going to just put these completely at random. I'm going to put them at little dips in elevation or elevation changes or where stuff flattens out. Just areas where you would see maybe some water has run off, which makes it more conducive to growing some plants and bushes. And I'm going to have them kind of in clumps or in lines rather than just randomly spread throughout. Once everything is done, I give the track a last little dust off just to make sure that everything is good. And then here is the final result. T-Track modules are a great way not only to practice and get better with scenery without doing a ton of investment, but it's also a great way to build a large layout that you can put away, and you can do all sorts of things with it in a very manageable size. So thank you guys so much for watching. I do want to say it is still American Heart Month, supporting Heart for PCOS. Check out the link in the description below. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, and happy railroading. Hey guys, sorry, no bloopers today. I guess I'm getting better on camera, but I just want to say I really enjoyed making this T-Track module. It's a project you can do in a weekend, and it looks fantastic. So if you want to check out some of those techniques that I use in greater detail, I've got videos here linked. And if you want to check out some playlists, go to the channel, hit subscribe, and check out some of those playlists with all these different videos. Thank you guys so much for watching.